Good morning. Welcome everyone to Toolkit Tuesday. I'm one of your hosts this morning, Jenny Horner, and with me are my colleagues, Amy Matusik, I believe Colleen Tucker might be on, and Vanetta may also be on as well. This topic is, we're continuing covering service coordinations and our manual that was put out to you all, and kind of just being the art of the facilitator or the service coordinator. I'm going to be talking about maintaining neutrality as a facilitator. This topic is interpreted in different ways, and it's up to you how you will approach being a service coordinator or facilitator. Different lenses see it in different ways. I'm going to show how it could be, how it's trying to obtain some neutrality in the meeting. And Nancy and Pat Miles are also on and are joining us from the Center of Excellence, and they're going to talk more about the being transparent as a facilitator or a service coordinator. This session will be recorded and shared on our website for future reference. Please either raise your hand or type in the chat box if you do have a question or comment, and also remember to remain muted at all times to avoid feedback and to avoid background noise. The presentation and handouts will be placed in the chat, and a survey will also be available at the end of today, which will help us improve future meetings. So we hope that you, as soon as this meeting is over, take advantage of completing this survey. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Here we go. Is it displaying the presentation? Okay, great. So as I said, I'm going to be talking more of seeing it as perceiving facilitation as being a neutral person in the room. And what does that exactly mean? And it's really just being that objective and unbiased person in the room, making sure that everyone has a voice in the room so they can access its collective intelligence, so we can get everyone's opinion. So we need that person when they enter the room to make a conscientious effort to be that objective and unbiased person as they enter. And why is this so important? Well, it creates an environment of fairness and inclusivity. It's not a room full of professionals looking down on the family and saying, here's what you've done wrong, and here's what we're going to need you to do. It ensures that all participants feel respected and have an equal opportunity to contribute. We want to make sure everyone has a voice, as well as everyone has an active part in the planning and the activities and the goals. It fosters open dialogue by creating a safe space where everyone can express their thoughts and opinions. It's very vital in conflict resolution, especially if there are members in the group that are not agreeing on something, or if something gets heated in the middle of the meeting. It's important to have that person that is objective in the room to kind of calm everyone down and make sure voices are still heard, but in a respectful manner. And it builds trust among everyone in the room. Everyone knows what they're getting once they enter that meeting. So how do you develop it? Well, one is self-reflection, making sure that you're taking time to reflect on your own beliefs and biases and emotions before you enter that room. Another way is seek diverse perspectives. Expose yourself to a range of viewpoints and opinions especially that's different from your own, and try to gather how they came up with that opinion. Another is to question your own assumptions. Challenge your assumptions and your own preconceived notions. Maybe they aren't 100% accurate, and why you have those assumptions about things. And also to practice empathy with all of your experiences and your emotions and the motivation of others, even if you disagree with them. I'm sure many of you have seen the Brené Brown clip on empathy, but I did want to share it in case there are any new professionals that haven't seen this. I really enjoy this. It's very short. So we'll go ahead and play it.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So it's that connection that we're all reaching for in these meetings, to let families know, and others in professionals and support systems in the room, that we're all in it together. That's what empathy is, and striving for that. Also verifying information. Sometimes we rely on information that isn't always accurate. So making sure that you're fact checking things in your own world, in your own life, and seeking out reputable sources of information. I too am guilty of this. I have a tendency to run to my husband and say, guess what's going to happen on Friday? And he'll say, well, where did you hear that? And I'm like, TikTok. And that's not necessarily a reputable source of information. Sometimes we forget that we need to fact check things in our own lives. And also to engage in critical thinking and developing your own critical thinking skills, and how you evaluate things and information in a meeting and arguments objectively, and working on that and how you can do better. Also, to practice emotional detachment. It's really difficult sometimes, but we do have to have boundaries in the meetings and with families that we work with. And while it's really important, we have to separate our own emotions from the situation. And make sure, again, that we are entering as an unbiased and an objective individual. And also consider long-term consequences, whatever you're discussing in those meetings and whatever you're bringing to the table might have long-term effects or down the road, or different decisions may happen because of something you may have said, an opinion of yours. So make sure that you're keeping that in check as well. Also, staying informed and continuously educate yourself on various topics and stay informed about community and current events. I think you're all very good at being involved in the community. Maybe get involved in committees work that is outside of your scope a little bit. Volunteer for the Homeless Awareness Day, where they go and they seek and find people that are truly homeless in their community. That's a very eye-opening day that you may not realize those people's lives from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. So really just staying informed on things in your community is very helpful too. And also practicing patience and humility. And be patient with yourself, and know that you're going to make mistakes too. I wanted to include this. This is on, this gentleman talks about perceived neutrality, and that it's how people feel. That's the whole purpose of this conversation today, is how your members of your team feel when they enter the room. And so I'd like to share this brief clip as well.
Hi, welcome to another episode of The Meeting Doctor. My name is Mike Goldman. Today, I want to focus on how do you maintain neutrality? In organizations, many of us have roles where we receive mandates, where we have subject matter expertise, where we have to train other people, and then we have to ask them for their input. We have to consult with them. We have to essentially facilitate them to actually come up with ideas. So whenever we walk into any conversation, it's almost impossible for any of us to be 100% neutral. So how do we come across neutral? Well, my end is forget about being 100% neutral, but think about creating perceived neutrality, in the sense that even though inside your head you may be thinking ideas, you may be critiquing what people say, but as far as they're concerned, you're coming across looking neutral. So how do you do that? Well, one of the ways to come across neutral is to make sure that you paraphrase back what people say, that you're actively listening, you're using eye contact, you're shaking your head and using encouragers when people speak, and that what you write down on a flip chart is in fact what those people are saying. And if not, you're checking in with them and revalidating what they're saying and changing whatever words you wrote up on the flip chart to match the words that they need. Another way is that instead of telling people what they need to know, you ask them questions. So if you need to advise them on a specific piece, process, or area of content, instead of telling them, you ask them, what's your knowledge? What do you know about this? So you get them to shift their thinking to the areas of intelligence that you want to leverage in the conversation. Another thing to do is that when people may ask you questions because they know you're a subject matter expert, you reflect those questions right back to them so they always answer. This will also give you time to maybe throw out a suggestion that may be helpful to them, and they may want you to record it on the flip chart. If you do throw out any suggestions, though, make sure you check in with them first by asking, what do you think, before you actually write it down. So again, it makes sure that anything that's written on the flip chart is in fact their ideas. If you're noticing that the group is thinking too narrowly, again, you can throw out suggestions in order to get them to expand their thinking. But again, always end with, what do you think, to make sure that what gets up on the flip chart is their ideas. And finally, if in fact you have to tell the group, you need to upgrade or enhance their knowledge before you move into a conversation, make sure you let them know that you're going to be playing two roles. The first role is going to be that of the subject matter expert or trainer, and the second role will be a neutral facilitator. When you're playing the role of the subject matter expert, make sure they know that that's the hat you're playing. And then when you switch to the facilitator, make sure you take off your subject matter expert hat, like literally physically show them this, and then say, I'm now putting on my facilitator hat, and begin then to ask questions. Understanding these tips and utilizing them will help create perceived neutrality during your discussions. Thanks for watching this episode of The Meeting Doctor.
So I wanted to share this because, again, I like that this is how people feel and trust when they enter the team meeting. And there may be times where you are directing the conversation. Like he said, you know, an example might be your community is not comfortable with recommending or supporting residential treatment for a child at a particular time without trying other local things. And so it might be up to you as a facilitator or service coordinator to take off your facilitation hat for a moment and say, here's where we're at. We know that the community and our partners are not comfortable and they're not willing to support residential treatment. But now moving forward, how can we discuss a plan to keep your child safe in our community with services and supports? And so these, again, are just different ways for you for professionalism that you bring to the table when you facilitate a meeting. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nancy and Pat, and they're going to talk to you more about transparency.
Okay. I'm not sure that Pat is on right now. Can you hear me, everybody? Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure that Pat is on right now because she had another meeting, so she may be joining us late. And so I wanted to start with saying that I agree very much that the skills and activities that were just presented in the slides there are very important facilitation skills, and useful in many different situations. And you especially want to be careful to ensure that all voices, I was taking notes as Jenny was saying, ensure that all voices are heard and respected, that it's a safe space, and that we're not addressing power dynamics. And certainly Brene Brown's information on empathy. But I was really struck by the meeting doctor and his idea of taking off a hat, putting it back on, making sure people are clear about that. And it struck me that service coordinators, wraparound facilitators, are always wearing at least 2 hats and sometimes 3 hats. You know, you're always a service coordinator who is guided by certain values of service coordination. And you're also a meeting facilitator. And in some instances, you're also a family and children first council director who is charged with lots of decision making. So you have multiple hats that you're wearing. And I wanted to share the screen here a little bit as well, because let's see, So as I said, as a family and children first facilitator and service coordinator, your website identifies several values that are relevant to service coordination and underlie the whole service coordination process. And they're different than the wraparound ones, but these are the ones that probably align with both service coordination and wraparound. And it says that it's collaborative, that it's an experience of coming together in authentic partnership around a family's priorities to identify who and what may be helpful, that it's strength-based, that the strengths of the youth, family, team, and community are identified and shared during meetings. Options for help are selected from those that have the strongest tie to real strengths. That it's youth guided. Young people are empowered, educated, and given decision-making role in their own lives. That it's family driven. Youth and parents are full and active partners throughout the process, and families have the primary role in decision regarding their children. That it's individualized, so that there's a unique set of strategies, supports, and services based on those family strengths, needs, priorities, and their desired outcomes. That it's culturally competent, that their values, attitudes, beliefs of the youth and family are honored and respected, and that services and supports are built on the strengths of the community and provided in the most home-like setting possible. So if that's the case, if meeting neutrality means that you're meeting the group where they are and not trying to push them to where you want them to go, or you're not leading the group to certain content or a certain direction, then that left me questioning. And I let Jenny know this ahead of time, which is why she said people have different perspectives. I kind of felt, I don't know, how many of you are old enough to remember 60 Minutes Point Counterpoint, or at least the Saturday Night Live version of that? Because I think I have a kind of a counterpoint thing, because I'm questioning whether, in fact, given these values, we should be neutral. If our job is to create a safe space, I think Jenny had in those slides, for everyone to participate, should you really remain neutral if you see actions or behaviors that may not be contributing to the safety and inclusion of members, or might not align with service coordination values? In those situations, non-neutrality might mean that you care enough about the voice of everyone in the room, so that if you see a power struggle or an imbalance, or behaviors that devalue or just disrespect any one person or group, you address that. And my experience has been that very frequently there is a power imbalance when lots of people have PhDs, MDs, licensure, and you have a family who only has mom after their name, or you have a youth who's 19 and who doesn't necessarily see the world the same way you do in spite of life experiences. I think oftentimes it's easy to devalue their perspective. And so from that, I think that we've been encouraged and trained to raise the voice of persons, of families and youth, continuously check in with them, see that they're being heard. So toward that, I would say that non-neutrality says that you address those imbalances that you see. You act compassionately and swiftly toward the person who, whether intentionally, implicitly biased, or ignorantly, show disrespectful, devaluing, or unkind actions. You don't remain neutral about seeing actions that can be hurtful to people, because what you've said is that you're going to create a safe space for everyone to be heard and listened to and valued. And you don't sit on the fence in an effort to be neutral, because by sitting on the fence, you're actually taking sides with the person who's being hurtful. So I see our challenge as one of how do we demonstrate all those wonderful facilitation skills that were just presented, while at the same time aligning our facilitation with the values that underlie our work, and doing that in a way that clearly honors the story of the young person and their family. So with that, I'd like to start with the question, how do you in fact prepare? How do you prepare families to be for service coordination meetings? Do you tell them that you're going to be neutral? What do you do? How do you prepare them? Anybody?
So usually when I do it, I usually just kind of like go through, I explain who's all going to be there. I kind of go through what happens from beginning to end. And I tell them kind of like the whole time I'm there that, you know, I have an opinion if you want my opinion, but I don't necessarily, you know, just start talking. I said, I let everyone else talk. And I'm like, I'm there kind of as a support system for you. And then if you want my opinion, I can give you my opinion. But that, again, is entirely up to you.
So what does it mean to be a support system for a family and a facilitator at the same time?
So for me, I usually during the meeting, I can usually kind of gauge by watching them when someone says something. So usually it's kind of the same almost, because like a lot of times I'll ask the questions that I might feel like, hey, I don't know the answer to that either. And I'll usually play it like that. Like I'll usually say, well, I don't understand. How would that work? And then sometimes that gives them clarity, but I'm also being a support, and I'll be like, hey, you know, that was kind of complicated. Did you get all that? I don't know if I did either.
Thank you, Tiffany. How else do other people prepare families for what's going to be happening during team meetings?
Hi, this is Nikki with Huron County. I was going back. Hi, I was going back to. I was thinking about what you were asking about the support piece. Now, as far as preparing the families, you know, I think we just try to give them, as Tiffany mentioned, an overview of what's going to happen. We give everybody an opportunity at the table to talk about where they are with their action items, you know, from the previous meeting. But as far as the supports, being a support, I think, you know, with our staff here, I think it's important that we make sure that the family is being heard. So I know, you know, we've seen in several meetings that, you know, sometimes the professionals at the table will want to kind of take over and tell the family what they want them to do. And so we try and, you know, I try to remind our caseworkers here that we need to make sure that we are advocating for the family and providing that support to make sure that they can also contribute to, you know, is this something after the professionals are giving ideas and recommendations? Is this something truly that the family wants, you know, before we go ahead and you know, purchase an adaptive item or whatever it may be, or, implement a service. So that's just kind of what we do.
So in those kinds of situations, Nikki, you don't necessarily stay neutral. You draw in the family to make sure that they are in fact approving of. It's their decision. How does that come across? How do you think that comes across to other team members? Do you think they're negative about that, or what's your reaction to that, what I'm terming non-neutrality or transparency?
I think, there are times where they're offended, but, and we always have to try to remind them too, that this is the purpose. We're involving the family and the youth because we need to ensure that they have a voice in everything that happens. So, whether it's high fidelity wraparound or basic service coordination, it's, at least from our perspective, and I know that's our role as FCFCs, is to ultimately ensure that the family is involved in decision making and that it's not just the professionals. So absolutely, there's always going to be someone who's upset, that their point is not being driven to, as far as, this is what the family wants. But the idea is that I think, we just need to keep reiterating, I believe, as FCFCs, that we've got to take the family's voice into consideration too when it comes to final decision.
Yeah, and I think that idea is not just taking it into consideration, but raising the family's voice, so that they are really equal partners in that kind of situation. I love that you said, keep bringing back to the other team members that this is the purpose. That's the idea of transparency versus neutrality. We're transparent that our facilitation is not 100% neutral. And in fact, we're not even trying to have it be perceived as neutral in some instances. What we're trying to do is base our facilitation on the values that we carry, and that we can't take that hat off. We can't say, oh, I'm going to take this off and be neutral here. That we wear that service coordination hat in to guide our facilitation process. And I think that's what you just said there, that you make it clear that we have these values and we guide in that perspective. Thank you. Others that any chat items or others?
This is Heather. I was just wanting to add on to what Nikki was saying, because I agree some of the language that she used. I often describe my role as a partnership to help advocate and support the family on their voices, to get their voice out there and their choices that they want. I also try to work closely with the family to help guide the agenda for the meetings. So they can, kind of guide and direct the agenda, and it's not professionals guiding or directing that as well. And just obviously, I think we, kind of goes without saying, we all do, is, they get to pick who sits at the table.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing up that whole point, Heather, of guiding and directing the agenda, because again, part of the neutral facilitation says that kind of step back and you are not guiding it, but you're talking about guiding it. And how do you guide that agenda?
How do I personally guide the agenda? Is that the question?
How do you do it? How long have you been doing this?
A little over 5 years.
So you've got some experience there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do my best to try to have a conversation prior to the meeting with the family. to kind of set some agenda items. If I can't do that, then I come in with a draft agenda kind of and have that discussion at the beginning of the meeting, kind of, hey, these are the topics on our agenda, or these are the topics that the family and I've discussed that they want on the agenda. And then is there anything else needs to be added to that? And then, you know, if people voice up and say they need to add it, then I kind of look to the family, kind of like how Nikki said, is that okay? Can we add that to the agenda? Are we going to have time? I mean, they kind of get to guide that piece. And then just as we are, it's really time management too, because we want to make sure we get to all those agenda pieces too. So sometimes you have to kind of say, this is great discussion, but I want to make sure we hit all of our agenda items. So, kind of guiding those agenda items, saying, hey, can you take this? I may ask a provider can you work on that outside the team meeting with whoever it is that you need to work on? Or can you follow up that as a task outside the team meeting so we can stay on the agenda and just kind of keep it, in a timely manner? That's in a perfect world. Obviously, every meeting is different and, in different things pop up. And so, that I'm not perfect at that by any means, but I do my best to try that.
Mm-hmm. So whether Heather or anybody else, what about the idea of running strength-based meetings and families or team members who may have experience with the family moving to a less than strength-based? Stephanie, you have some thoughts? Stephanie, are you on? Because we can't hear you. FaceTime video. Okay. Well, I can finally hear you. So even though we can't see you. So Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
I'm sorry. What was the question? I was walking from one room to another.
Oh, okay. So we had talked about the idea of strength-based and the value of being strength-based. And sometimes in meetings, team members tend to be less than strength-based. And how do you facilitate around that? And how neutral can you be, or how much do you guide it through those values of strength-based?
Strength-based in regard to the families, you mean?
In regard to the whole service coordination process.
Well, I mean, as far as the conversation about the families being involved and being the service coordinator being supportive of the family, if we don't have the family buy-in, then we're not going to have any follow-through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to make sure the family is capable and then rise them up if they're not, to make sure that they can meet the expectations to get the results that we're looking for.
Rise them up. How do you rise them up? That's a great term,
Well, I personally think showing up more often, just being present.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe making them a priority and showing up a little more often to make sure that they're getting what they need, so then they can accomplish what needs to be done.
And in that showing up, how do you prepare them for the meetings that they're going to be attending, where those other people may not have been showing up in the same way?
I think making sure and asking questions and relieving any fears or frustrations before they get in front of a group of people that they might not be as comfortable with. Mm-hmm. Just building that connection and making sure they're comfortable enough to be vulnerable just because you're there, even if they don't want to be vulnerable in front of everybody else.
Yeah. So that sounds like what you're saying is you're an ally with the family. And they know that going into meetings, that you're there and that you're there to boost them and to align with them and to ensure that they're heard.
Yes, I think you have to be an ally. if they don't see you as an ally, then I don't know that you could adequately support them.
Yeah, thank you. So how does that being an ally impact the, and this isn't just to Stephanie, this is to everybody. How does that being an ally impact your relationship with other team members during a facilitation process?
I just want to add, part of the facilitation process is the engagement with all the people at the table outside of team meetings. And so if you've had that one-on-one engagement with all those individuals outside of the team meetings, then they have an understanding of what your role is. And you've built that relationship to where what the hope is, it's not always, again, it's not always a perfect situation, but the hope is that you've built that relationship enough that when you're trying to advocate and be that ally and that partner for the family, that they're not going to take offense in the fact that you are putting that particular hat on in the moment.
Yeah. So that goes to the pre-meeting role of being transparent and being able to say that I do have these two roles. I'm not just a neutral facilitator sitting back. I'm there with a specific service coordination purpose. And when people are aware of that, it sounds like in those situations, they may be able to accept some of the non-neutrality in any given meeting. What are other people's experiences with strength-based or guiding meetings?
This is Mary.
Okay, Mary.
Yeah, I think it's important for the family to understand that they have options, that it's so that they can retain some power and control within their life, and that it's not going to be a situation directed to them.
Explain that a little bit more, Mary.
I'm thinking of a particular family that we have where the mom is very regressive and asks for permission from every family member and doesn't make decisions for herself. And it's a CPS case, and she doesn't understand that she still has rights and options and decision making and control of the outcome of the process.
And so how do you support her during meetings to be able to feel that or experience that?
I meet with her. I meet with her a lot individually and give her baby steps, because she can't incorporate a big long process of I have a year to get my kids back. She can't do that. It has to be baby steps for her, and helping to teach her the ability to make decisions, and then also talking about what her repercussions are for the results of those decisions.
So much like Stephanie was talking about, that that you work individually to make sure that the family knows that you're an ally, that the family knows you're going to be part of that, and you work between between meetings to boost that position, not only among the other team members, but within that person themselves, so they begin to realize their own strength. So you're talking about, not just empowering the youth in a youth guided, but also empowering family members who may not feel their power in a
Right.
group that is so heavily loaded with professionals.
Correct. Yeah.
Are there others who find ways to maintain the strength focus throughout meetings, and how transparently do you do that, and how do you quietly, in a more perceived but not transparent fashion, do that?
Well, folks are thinking about that. I just wanted to add one thing, Nancy. I'm a trained facilitator as well. And one of the things you hear a lot is about buy-in. And I think it's come up today too. And buy-in is when I have a great idea and I want you to have it too. When we co-create, that means it's a shared plan. We've co-created it. So I can see a piece of me in that plan. So I kind of challenge folks to think a little bit differently about, thinking in terms of co-creating with the team versus that kind of idea of we're going to try to get them bought into something. Because even if you don't use those words, you get the sense of what's going on. But words are very intentional. And if we use them intentionally, we start to shift the thinking about how we approach stuff. And so I think that this one becomes, we've talked a lot about values. Because in the handbook, we worked really hard to make sure that values were incorporated into that for everything. And Nancy's referred to it several times. And those values have to drive everything. And some of that is around, we use certain language because that's what's going to help people to understand or to be respectful or whatever you want to call it. So I just thought I'd throw it out there for another way to think about it.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to think about meeting facilitation. I'm curious, what do you do when you're actually experiencing dismissive kinds of behavior toward any member of the group, whether it's to a family member, to a youth, or even to another team member? How do you address those kinds of dismissive or unkind or hurtful? How do you create that safety within your meetings?
I kind of do like a reminder type thing a lot of times because I think sometimes we get comfortable in situations with each other. And so I kind of do like a reminder of who this is, what's happened, where we've came from, the progress, and just kind of reevaluate where everybody's at and that we're still on the same page and what we're wanting out of that situation.
And how do people respond to that kind of guidance?
Usually pretty well. They usually, because I think sometimes the longer it goes on, people get stagnant or they get frustrated or they start, and we have to have that reminder of what everybody is here for. So if I have to remind them, hey, this counselor's here for this and this and this reason, the parents are here because this is their goals, this is what they're wanting. And then I just kind of like remind everyone, are we still on the same page? It kind of reminds them why they wanted to be in this group in the first place.
Thank you, Tiffany. Others who have needed to deal with the idea of or the actual reality of persons being minimizing, devaluing family input? And how do you address that?
I sometimes will just actually say, you really seem to be upset, struggle, whatever. And, we've noticed that this person has really started doing what they need to do. So can you help me understand why it's a struggle for you right now? And actually kind of call it out as best I can in a nice way. Just, you seem to have a difficulty with this. Help us understand it. So maybe we can offer support.
So you're looking to support both the other team members as well as the family in the process. Is that what you're saying, Elaine?
Yeah, and basically, again, get everybody on that same page again of how do we do this and what do we need to do? Yes.
And Elaine, that's the topic, that's the part of the neutrality that I presented on, is more of professionalism. And so I don't see it as someone sitting on the fence and not advocating for anyone in the room, but more as once we enter that team meeting, I'll be the professional and everyone else is now a team member, and we will have that combined voice, like Sharon was saying. And I would expect everyone to evaluate me after the meeting of how did I do? How did I do doing that? How well did I do making sure that everyone's voices was elevated, not just the family. That's where sometimes you get into a situation where you can't always be the ally of the family. You want to make sure their voice is elevated and that they are a team member. But sometimes an advocate should be brought to the table to do that for them or with them. I think that's the topic of neutrality that I was presenting on earlier, is more as the professionalism and not crossing the boundaries a little bit, because I'm not their counselor. I'm not their mentor. I will help them elevate their voice and develop a team for them and with them. And I will try to keep that team productive and moving forward, and not get stagnant and not let anyone insult anyone, because that will be my job. So I hope that explains a little bit of that definition of neutrality, is more of trying, not so much sitting back saying you all hash it out, but the actual opposite of elevating everyone's voice in that room. Because the real reality is you do have funders. Your funders are at that table and they expect results. The family expects results. It's elevating everyone's voice as a team that is important too.
Mm-hmm.
This is Mary. I agree with Jeannie as far as that I've been in that situation where a team member may get agitated because maybe they've had a longer relationship with the family. And I think regardless of how that conversation is said, the information is still valid, and maybe should be said in a different way. So I ask about rephrasing, and then I rephrase and summarize in an interpretation. And then I ask that person, is that what you're saying? So I acknowledge their words, and then I go back to the parent and take it back to the family to see if that interpretation matches. So they have input.
So thank you, Mary. I think that idea of the validity of everybody's and reframing in a way that is that you check out with the family as well, and that you maybe reframe in a strength-based way, maybe look at. But Heather, you started talking about flipping the perspective in the chat box. Talk about that.
I think we get trained to kind of listen and hear what others are saying and be able to find that positive or that strength in that, whatever it is that they're saying, because even, that's not always easy to do. But, maybe a session, for instance, maybe a therapist comes to the table and in a session just got blew up. Well, you could flip the perspective and say, you know what, though, it's really great that they even showed up for that session, and just really try to point out a positive to kind of shift some perspective and some different strengths and positive thinking, and realize that even some of those smaller accomplishments are things to celebrate.
Yeah. Have others done the same kinds of things, but have been, respectful of the other team members? Because that's what you want to model. You want that space to be a safe space for everybody. And sometimes the imbalance is one that you need to do the reframing that you just talked about, Heather. Others do the same thing?
This is Mary again. I would just add, it's very disrespectful, in my opinion, for a family member to feel hostility in a meeting. And I think the way, as far as the facilitator, the way you can help mitigate that is change your voice and change your intonations and soften your voice and those kind of things, because that can really change the direction of the meeting.
So you're talking about modeling, not just being transparent about, but actually modeling the kind of respectful interaction to create that safe space and develop an atmosphere where that's
yeah.
Yeah, the environment. Thank you, Mary. We haven't talked about kind of Sharon was talking about co-creating strategies, interventions, actions, and again, I 100% agree with that skill of being able to pull the team together to co-create. And I look at, how do you co-create while still focusing on choosing those activities, strategies, interventions that are most strength-based, that build on the strengths of the family, that build on the strengths of the community. Is that something that you're finding difficult, something that teams are open to, something that's relatively easy for you?
Nancy, we only have about a minute left, so I just wanted to make sure you know that the evaluation is in the chat. So if you just click on that, you can get to the evaluation. I'll also send a link out right after the meeting so that you can also use that.
Well, since we only have a minute, does anybody have anything that they really want to point out or stress? Jenny or?
No, thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. I think it's very valuable information, and we're so grateful that you're participating in these Toolkit Tuesdays. We will post this on our website as well so that you can share this with other staff or partners in the future. We just want to thank everyone for coming today and sharing their thoughts.
Can I add one thing while we're at it? I'm
Yes.
sorry. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew who I'm Sharon Ongst, and I'm kind of the project manager. And I'm the one who, when you call me or you email me and say something's all screwed up, I'm the person who will fix it. So I just want to make sure you know that I really want to help you in any way I can. So if there's anything wrong, please, call me, email me, whatever you need. And I just wanted to make sure you knew put a face with the name that you've seen for a few years. Sorry.
And I too am appreciative of your participating in this discussion and looking at both the point and the counterpoint of this discussion. Thank you.